welcome to Solosaurus, a podcast about one-player board and card games. I'm Brandon Waite.
And I'm Carter Mackey.
And this is a game about birds that has everybody talking, which is the sort of thing I never thought I would say. We're going to be reviewing Wingspan. That's what I'm trying to say. Wingspan this time.
Birds.
Birds all the time. But first, we're going to cover the news like we always do. Our first bit of news this week is that Board and Dice has announced Teotihuacan, the late pre-classic period, which might be the most boring name for an expansion ever. But it's an expansion to a game that a lot of people love. This is going to add player powers to Teotihuacan, which I think sounds similar to what happened to Tzolk'in, how they expanded that. Because you have these asymmetric player powers that come in the expansion for that game, plus you have these various effects that impact each season. Apparently, that element of what happened in Tzolk'in is coming over to Teotihuacan as well. I mean, they don't draw those direct correlations, but this game is a sequel to that one. It sounds very similar. I still haven't played Teotihuacan. I know that we've gotten a lot of requests for us to review that.
Right. I was going to ask, I couldn't remember if you had played it yet.
No, I have not played it yet because NSKN Games, which is now part of Board and Dice, did say they would send us a review copy. So if you're listening to this NSKN, I haven't forgotten. They haven't sent it to us. So we're just waiting on that to come in one day. And if we ever get it, I would love to review it. And now I would love to review the snooze-inducing late pre-classic period. Because even though the name is boring, I'm sure this is going to be awesome.
Yeah.
The player powers added so much to Tzolk'in, I can't imagine it wouldn't be great here. So I know a lot of people are excited about this. My understanding is that this will be coming out at Gen Con this year in August. So if you're interested in that, keep your eyes open. It won't be long now. Our next bit of news this week is another expansion, and that is Terraforming Mars Turmoil, a 5th expansion for Terraforming Mars, which adds more corporations, projects, and a new type of card called a global event to the base game. And this is not really a surprise because it's been another month, so why wouldn't we have another Terraforming Mars expansion?
God, I don't know if I realized we were up to 5 already.
Yeah, I mean, well, one of them is just an alternate board. I mean, a double-sided board, so That's not that big of a deal. But then they have the one where you have colonies, there's the Venus Next expansion, and there's Prelude.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, they're just cranking these things out, and based on what I can tell from stuff that the Dice Tower has put out, just based on Cool Stuff Inc. sales, I think all 4 of those expansions were in the top 10 best-selling expansions of last year.
Man, I do love Terraforming Mars.
Man, I do too, but apparently so does everybody else on the planet, on this planet.
Right, of course. Martians hate it.
Yeah, the Martians do hate it. But as long as Earthlings continue to love it, we will definitely see more of these. So this is a small box expansion, and it looks like it's coming out at Spiel in October. So if you love Terraforming Mars, there's more of this coming for you. And our next bit of news for this week is Anachrony has an expansion coming out called Fractures of Time that Mindclash Games has been teasing for some time now. And we now know that it's going to come to Kickstarter in April. This is going to add a new path, which is the name that they give to the different factions in the game. The Path of Unity, and it's going to give you the ability to use some kind of new material in the game to blink to another action, meaning you place down a worker, as I understand it, and if you have the right resources, you can move that worker after it's already placed to another spot. So basically just giving you greater action efficiency than most worker placement games have, certainly more than the base game had.
Right, that sounds so cool though. One more knob to like mix things up or just to get more efficiency or just the most potential out of everything. I don't know. Sounds awesome.
I think so too. I mean, what's really neat to me is gathering the kind of resources that you need to pull this off is, of course, going to be a very valuable action, but it has some possible negative side effects, like shutting down some of your exosuit bays, making it so that you can't actually use those, or giving you increased susceptibility to different anomalies and that sort of thing that crop up in your timeline. So I love it. Everything about it sounds awesome. And my understanding is that David Turczi is still working with that crew on this expansion and that all the elements of this expansion are going to be compatible for solo play.
Good.
Yeah, I'm pumped. I love Anachrony so much. If you haven't listened to our review of that, you definitely should go back and check it out. That is Anachrony Fractures of Time coming to Kickstarter in April. Our final bit of news this week is that Leader Games has put out Root the Underworld expansion on Kickstarter. And if you've listened to our review a couple of episodes back, you know we love Root, but we aren't crazy about the solo mode that comes in the first expansion for that. This new expansion is going to add a couple of new factions, and we have just found out by looking at the Kickstarter page, they are going to be formalizing the Better Bot project on Board Game Geek that we really liked for solo play, and that is just so cool to me.
Yeah, it makes the game so good for solo.
Yeah, and now you don't have to worry about print and play components because you can get actual boards for this. And I don't know, I just think it's cool to see a publisher reward the good hard work of one of their fans who took their product and actually made it better.
Yeah.
Just such a cool move for Leader Games, and everything about this expansion looks awesome. So if you haven't checked it out yet, check it out on Kickstarter. It should be going for another couple of weeks after this airs. That's all we've got for the news this week, so we're just going to move right into the review, which is for Wingspan. Wingspan is a game from designer Elizabeth Hargrave and comes to us from publisher Stonemaier Games. Came out this year in early 2019 and plays 1 to 5 players. In Wingspan, you are going to play a bird enthusiast, a researcher, bird watcher, ornithologist, collector who's seeking to discover and attract the best birds you can to your network of wildlife preserves. So each bird extends a chain of powerful combinations in one of your habitats, and these habitats focus on a couple of different aspects of growth. So you're going to gain food tokens via this cool custom bird feeder looking dice tower in the middle of the table. You're going to lay eggs using egg miniatures on your different bird cards in a variety of colors. And you're going to draw from hundreds of unique bird cards and play them down into your actual aviary. And the winner is going to be the player with the most points after 4 rounds. And in the solo game, which comes in the box, that means you are going to be competing against an automa from the automa factory. So that's what the game is about. We're going to start like we always do by talking about the components. And the components for this game?
Man, the components are incredible in this game.
Yeah, it's really amazing what you get in this box. I mean, the MSRP for this game is $39.99.
Yeah, I feel like for the game and the components, top-notch components, totally worth. I mean, it's a great deal.
Yeah, it's a great deal just based on the stuff you get in the box, and I just love the creativity that they show in how they managed to put together a nice-looking package. Because again, this game just proves that you can have one of the best-looking games on the market, in my opinion, without miniatures.
Yes.
I mean, it has these beautiful little egg tokens that look like candy. The desire to put them in your mouth is so strong. I haven't done it yet, but I'm close.
Right.
Yeah, it's so good. They look wonderful, and they're different colors, even though the colors don't serve any kind of function. I just think that's fantastic. I don't know. I'm so used to colors serving a function in games that when they just decide to give you multiples simply because it looks prettier that way, that just feels luxurious.
Yeah, it is. It is luxurious. Everything about this production quality is luxurious. The manual is like printed on a linen finish paper.
It's freaky. It really is. I felt like I kept rubbing my hands together after I read the rulebook because it just left a weird feeling on them.
Yeah, it is kind of strange. It's almost off-putting. It's like borders on off-putting.
Yeah, it's the definition of overproduced.
Yeah.
Because I feel like I could pour water on it and it would just run right off. I'm not going to try.
Right.
But it just feels incredible. I mean, of course, the showstopper is this cardboard dice tower that comes in there, which is totally superfluous. All you have to do is just roll the dice and leave them on the table. But it just organizes the game area a little bit more. It looks beautiful. It took me maybe 5 minutes to build this thing, and it fits back in the box.
Right.
That's insane. We could go on for a long time about production. And, I mean, maybe we should, because the cards are great. It comes with a game trays insert to hold the cards, and the lid for the insert like displays the cards nicely for you on the table.
Right, for which birds are available for purchase.
Plus the artwork for the birds is fantastic.
Right, yeah, it's done in that like bird watching, or like, I don't know what they call them, bird watching guides, like that style of art, I feel like.
Yeah, at first I thought they were photos based on the screenshots I'd seen online. And that was a little off-putting to me. I don't like the idea of screen caps and photos in games.
Right.
But it's not. It's just really great artwork.
Right. I do think I remember seeing like a credit maybe at the end of the manual saying that they use photographs from different ornithological. That's probably the word.
Yeah, that sounds like the word.
Right. Sources like Audubon.
I just think production-wise, the whole thing is amazing. Not only do all these pieces look great, but there are 170 unique cards in this game, and they all have unique artwork.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how many games do that? They didn't have to do that. They could have used multiples here and gotten away with it for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But even down to... So all those things come together to create a package that's beautiful to look at for sure. But the thing that really pushes this over the top for me is the attention to little details. So for instance, on the side of the bottom of the box, there's a diagram for how to fit everything back into the box well.
Right.
I mean, that's such a small, simple thing, but that means they didn't have to include a full insert because they've given you instructions for how to set it into the box. It's a small little detail, or the fact that there are these objective goal cards that you get at the beginning of the game that sort of drive your strategy. At the bottom of the cards, it tells you what percentage of cards in the deck can help you fulfill that strategy.
I guess I feel like that would be, like, to summarize most of the design of this game, is just really thoughtful to how it all goes into the box. Like, it comes with a couple of trays for the food and eggs, and they have lids that fit on nice and securely, and then you can just open them up, and they just have their own little trays that you can use and distribute at two different sides of the table. There's just lots of thought and care put, I feel like, into every aspect of the design of the game.
Yeah, and so what you're left with then is an elegant production. And so the components are amazing, but of course games are more than their components. But I'm happy to say that the play for this game is really well done.
Yeah, it's really, I feel like, very simple, straightforward, pretty, I don't know, I guess intuitive. What would you say?
Yeah, I think there are definitely aspects of this theme that have to be abstracted out to make it into an engine-building card game, right? But what the birds do when you play them into your habitat makes thematic sense.
Right.
If it's a larger bird, it has this ability to grab smaller birds out of the air and eat them. And mechanically, that just means you tuck that smaller bird under your card and it's worth a point at the end of the game. So, I mean, I guess there are these thematic touches everywhere in the game that help the rules to take root in your mind very easily, I would say. I mean, there aren't many rules anyway, and the rule book's very well done. Yeah,
I guess I would say it's like the rules are simple and straightforward enough, and there's like the theme works well enough that it kind of ties it all together, but it's not necessarily like crazy thematic.
No, I wouldn't say so, but it has nice thematic touches that make you think, oh, that is what this bird would do, or that is what this bird would eat.
Right. Yeah. So like whenever you have a giant eagle and you're just like, oh, please, I just want to draw a small bird so my big eagle can just gobble them up.
It feels so satisfying when it happens. Yeah, you see some little finch come out whenever you draw the card, and you're like, you poor sucker. You're mine. You are my dinner.
Yes.
Yeah, it feels great. And that's also helped along, I think, by the fact that the bird cards have this little bit of flavor text at the bottom of them for every single bird.
Right.
And some of the stuff that they put on there is really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like one of the birds that I found was named after the scientist who worked with them a lot. And apparently he died because he handled these birds that were preserved with arsenic for years and he passed away. I mean, that's not something I needed to know.
Right.
But it was something that when it came up, when we played our multiplayer game, I shared it with everybody else at the table and we all enjoyed it.
Right.
I don't know. It's a nice touch that helps you to draw you in a little bit more.
And it's nice that we can enjoy in the death of another person we never knew too.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Yeah, I slept really well that night.
Right, good.
But the play for the game is actually just really simple. So all you're going to do on your turn is you're either going to play a bird card into your aviary, you're going to get more food from the bird feeder, which just allows you to put down more birds in your aviary in the first place. You're going to lay eggs on cards, which will get you points at the end of the game, or they help you to get more birds out onto the table, or you're going to draw more cards. I mean, that's really it. There are only 4 main actions that you can do in the game, but what's really satisfying here is that there's a pretty decent rules to complexity ratio here. All the actions are very simple, but they have these cascading effects that make them really interesting to play. And the main reason for that is when you take one of these actions, apart from the play a bird action, the other 3, when you take their action, you activate every bird in the row that action is associated with. So the more birds you're playing down, the more stuff you're doing with every passing turn.
And the thing that I like about that is how, as you go through the 4 main rounds of the game, you're losing 1 action per round. And so you have less actions to take that round, but your actions are becoming more and more powerful as your aviary gets bigger and you have more birds and you're going to activate more of those actions.
Yeah, and when I first read that in the rulebook, I thought, I don't know that I like the idea of an engine game that gives you fewer actions as you go throughout the game. But I think it's a really smart design decision, not only because the game would drag if you kept the same amount of actions from start to finish because all of your turns take longer.
Right.
But also because you have that sense when you're getting to the end of the game, like it's crunch time and I need to make all of these actions count. And unlike other games where you need to make your actions count to eke out a few points and to do some small thing to push you just a little bit further, this feels really good because it's like I've got 3 options of things that I could do. This one's going to give me like 10 points, which is a really good chunk of points. This one is really awesome too, and it seems cooler on the table, but maybe it's only going to give me 8. I don't know. It just feels like there's a lot of tension trying to think through what your best option is, but all the options are great.
Right. I guess that's what I would say. It's just like it creates a really good, satisfying kind of tension of like, okay, how am I going to make the most of it? Not like you said, just eking out a couple of spare points. It's, what are my last big plays going to be? Yeah.
And that's the sort of thing where for me, a lot of engine building games kind of fall flat. You spend the whole game building up this engine, and the middle part of engine building games is usually the most satisfying, where you start to see all the pieces that you've put in place come together in a nice way. And that starts to feel like things are clicking. But then by the time you get to the end of the game, for a lot of these, the pacing is such that it feels like you just get everything going and you never have a chance to run what you've done. I feel like in this game, if I'm doing even decently well, I have at least one round where all the things I've set up, I can make run for me and it's going to work.
Right.
That feels nice. I mean, it still has, from my perspective, that engine building problem where the first few turns of the game feel like you can accomplish nothing.
Right. It's like, I feel like after the first main round of this game, you're just like, well, I'm not going to do well.
No, absolutely not. I mean, because you're spending, one whole action to draw a card.
Yeah.
Or to get one piece of food, and it just feels like, I have to do this 3 more times before I can put down one bird.
Right. But I mean, I guess that's the part I love about engine games is that it's just like how bad the beginning feels just makes the end feel so awesome when you're just having these massive turns.
Yeah, and this is definitely a game that nails that feeling of, I have created this thing. I mean, you look down at your board and it's full by the end of the game.
Mm-hmm.
It's full of choices that you made, and there is so much progress that happens, and steady progress that happens throughout the game, that the pacing of this is really nice, I think. And so if that overview sounds kind of simple, that's because it really is. I mean, this is a Euro-style game, and a lot of people have compared it to Terraforming Mars, I guess just because it's an engine builder, and because there's one element of how you plan to keep the cards that you get at the beginning of the game that feels pretty similar.
Right.
But otherwise, I don't really think that comparison is necessary. This is a much lighter game than Terraforming Mars.
Yeah, I mean, nowhere close as far as like category of weight. There's just so many things in Terraforming Mars of managing the temperature, the oceans going down, the amount of oxygen. There's all these different things you're taking into effect. The different goals you're trying to go for the end of the game of being first at things or having the most of something. It's just a lot more going on.
I definitely agree. I wouldn't say this is a family weight style game, but I would say it's one step above that. I mean, it's a medium, but light side of medium Euro game.
Yeah.
But that's not to say that it doesn't have interesting decisions to be made.
Right.
I think there are a lot of interesting decisions here. I mean, chief among them just being trying to draft cards that combo well together. I mean, some of that is down to luck of the draw, but I don't think the luck plays that significant of a factor here. Even though you're drawing from a large deck, you're going to come across cards here that are going to help you and work well with your combos. And when you plan it out just right, it's very satisfying when you can line up a really nice chain of birds that you activate all at once.
It feels really good. And it's just always that, I mean, like with all of these games, there's a certain threshold you pass where you're like, all right, I got this under control. I got card draw in a good place. I got food in a good place. And you're just trying to really maximize the amount of points at that place because your engine is going.
What I think is interesting, though, is that all of that is true. But usually when I think of engine building games, I associate them with abundance. and just managing abundance very well, not only in terms of how many choices you have to make, but also the amount of resources that you have at your disposal, because that just grows and grows throughout the game.
Mm-hmm.
That's true here too, but I also appreciate that resource management feels tight throughout the entire game.
Right. It always feels tight. I mean, you get to that point where you have the ability to make those bigger plays, but it's never just, I feel like you're never just drowning in a resource most of the time. Most of the time, it's all very, very tight as you're trying to maximize.
Yeah, you might think you want that to happen. You might think you want to drown in resources in a game, but in reality, keeping things tight adds to tension that manages in this game to stay throughout the entire game. It's like the tension grows with you as you continue to move forward.
Mm-hmm, definitely.
And I just think that's an interesting mix. That's the best of both worlds, in my opinion. One of the reasons I like that is because that tight resource management kind of directs your decisions. You know, you want to put out maybe this bird on the table, but if you don't have the option of getting that food, you need to have another plan. And so you can do anything you want to in this game, I guess, but you can't do everything you want. And so you have to decide based on the resources that are available what you're going to go for. Plus, you've got these objectives that guide you throughout the game.
Right, in short term and long term.
Yeah, there are round objectives. So maybe you want to be the person that has the most birds that have eggs on them in the grasslands, for instance, or you want to have the most eggs total in this type of environment. I mean, they're pretty simple, easy to understand goals, and the goals themselves change from game to game. Mm-hmm. You know, there's a pool of them you pick from, so that's going to be random variables set up every game. You've got that guiding your decision. And what's really nice about that is all of the round goals are visible from the beginning of the game. And so even if you know for sure, I'm not going to be able to get this round's completed, I'm not going to be able to beat my, real opponent or my AI opponent, you can go ahead and start building up for the next round and make sure that you get that one.
Right. And each round goal goes up in the amount of points it's worth too. So it's like a very viable strategy to focus on those in-game rounds if you wanted to.
Yeah, and not only that, but also as long as you're on the board at all, contributing toward one of those goals, you're eligible for points.
Right.
And I really like that because it would be very easy just to say, okay, I'm not going to get this one, I'll just move on. But there's still a part of you that's like, well, but if I could just do a little bit, then I won't fall that far behind. I really like that tension as well in the end of round stuff. But that coupled with the fact that at the beginning of the game, you draw these end of game objective cards that are going to guide your entire strategy for the game. I mean, you draw 2, you keep 1. So it's not like a major thing, but you want to look this game for birds that have small wingspans.
Right.
Or birds that live in this kind of environment. I think that's just very helpful in terms of helping you create a manageable strategy for the game.
Right. I mean, or just even like, okay, I have 5 cards. I'm not going to keep all of these cards starting off. And having this goal is like, well, these 2 cards help me towards my goal, so I'll keep them. And they work out, Yeah,
that's right. Because at the beginning of the game, you get this hand of 5 cards, and you can keep any of them that you want, but you have to pay a food for each card that you keep. So that's a pretty agonizing decision, or it can be. Mm-hmm. But if you've got a goal card in front of you, you can just say, okay, well, this fits with what I want to do. This doesn't. And that's how you manage it. It's great because it's like Terraforming Mars Decision, but with training wheels on. That's the element of this game that feels very similar.
Right.
I think, but it's such a small part.
Yes, it's the one time. It's not like not an every round kind of deal.
Right. Overall, I think that those things come together to create this feeling of freedom and growth, but also that constrains you just enough to help you figure out a way through the puzzle you've been given. And that's the kind of game I like, because really you're at your most creative when you're given boundaries to work within.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's just a great, compelling, fun package. And the solo mode for this game, which is created by the Automa Factory, does a really good job of replicating a lot of the feeling that you get of playing this multiplayer in the solo game. I mean, almost everything about the multiplayer is intact.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, even the things that I think wouldn't be. So there's a type of bird card that its special ability is only activated on another player's turn with specific conditions. And there's a certain action the Automa takes where it does this thing, and then it says just automatically activate all of those kinds of cards, which is nice. So you're still getting the benefit. It doesn't make those cards obsolete or worthless, which is somewhat of a tendency for game solo modes to do.
Oh, definitely. I was very pleased to see that all the cards are viable in the solo mode that I've run into anyway. I haven't seen any that I would say, that's not worth playing in this mode.
Yeah, I mean, there's like a few cards that feel like, oh, this is like a little bit cheaty because this should benefit everyone, but it only benefits me in this scenario. But there's other ways that the Automa gets extra points that are, kind of cheating in a sense too. And I feel like it's all taken into account.
Yeah, that's true. But the way the Automa cheats does a good job of providing you with a bit of a challenge, I think. As
right.
Because you're taking away that human element, you need a little bit of something extra to make the Automa viable. And one of the ways that they achieve that is just by saying the Automa is going to get a head start here on these objectives, on the end of round objectives. But you can see the kind of head start they have. And over the course of a round, you're going to be flipping cards every time it's the Automa's turn to determine what they do.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not going to be collecting resources for them or doing any of that kind of troublesome stuff. But you might add tokens next to the objective for that round saying, okay, they fulfilled one more of this objective than they started with.
Mm-hmm.
So you get this sense of, okay, I need really this many just to have a chance at beating the Automa for these goals. Plus, I feel like there's a good chance they're going to get 2 or 3 more of these over the course of the round.
Right.
I don't know. It just feels predictable in a nice way.
Mm-hmm.
Even though the system is basically the same random card flip that we've seen from Automa Factory over and over again. But the deck is smaller this time around. And you go through the deck every round. You're going through the same deck. And so you get a sense of what's coming and you know what's in the deck already. I don't know. That feels nice.
Yeah. And I think the reason it emulates pretty well is whenever you're playing with people, because we did play one game multiplayer, is, the other players are going to have, like, they're going to do a gather food action, or they're going to do a laying eggs action, or they're going to draw new cards. And so all of those things will kind of be affected and hit in like relatively equal measure because you're just going to have to do it eventually at some point. And that's what the Automa deck does at the same point. It will affect the pool of food you have available. It will affect the cards that you have drawn. You don't know when, but it's going to do it at some point in this round.
Yeah, that feels really nice to me. I think they really do an excellent job at replicating the experience with really just one deck of cards. And a small deck at that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, the other thing I like about this is that over the course of the game, at the end of each round, you're going to take out one card from the deck. So it gets a little bit smaller. Like they lose potential actions in the same way that you do.
I mean, it's specific cards. It's the same card every time.
Yeah, it's the same card every time.
Mm-hmm.
But it's nice that it feels like that element is preserved to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's not exactly the same as what's happening to you, but it also means greater predictability as the game goes on because you're removing cards from the deck.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I just found it to be a nice, pleasant Automa system. Everything is very clear as far as what you're supposed to do from me in terms of just, how it's going to affect the board state or what food it takes out of the defeater or anything like that. All of that feels good. The only thing that was a little bit confusing is how the goals are managed. I mean, you mentioned in particular you had some issue with that.
Yeah, the goal system's a little strange in the sense that the Automa, based on the goal for that round, has a base starting value. It can get actions or cards turned over that give it extra points towards that end of round goal. And looking to figure out which base value it has, you have to change those cards around. Sometimes you can forget. I was a little confused at first of just what it was even saying when I was talking about base points, because that doesn't really mean a lot to me, I guess, just hearing it. But yeah, I mean, I figured it out after a couple of minutes, but it just wasn't initially clear. I think you didn't have any problem with it, though.
No, I didn't have any trouble with it, but I could see where the trouble could come in, where it could be confusing. Overall, though, I think it was easy to manage. It's a good challenge, I thought. I mean, I managed to beat it maybe 2/3 of the time. But I also felt like I had a couple of games where I played really well. And if you don't play optimally, it will beat you.
Yeah, I would say all of my games were close, whether or not I won or lost. But the difficulty, it's not the most satisfying way to improve difficulty on this. For me personally, I don't know how you felt about it.
Yeah, I didn't think it was the most satisfying system where it collected more points per card based on the higher up the difficulty chart you go. But I still thought it worked pretty well.
Yeah, it worked well. And I mean, it's the system that once you learn it, it's fine and you can just fly through the AI's turns, which is what you want. You don't want to spend a lot of time.
You can fly through it, really?
I mean, why not?
Way to use the bird language.
Hey, listen, I'm just going with it.
I mean, I agree, though. It really is so fast. The turns are quick. The whole game was quick.
Mm-hmm.
I was knocking out games of this in 35 minutes, I would say. And 35, 40 minutes. That's a good length for me.
I would say 30 minutes for me after I played my first game.
Wow. I mean, and for the depth that you get and the amount of decisions you're making, I think that's pretty nice.
Right.
It's a really good play experience, low rules overhead, crunchy decisions, but it plays fast. And because of the insert and everything, it sets up quick too.
Sets up quick. I mean, it's straightforward to set up anyway. And I mean, you're making good choices, but they're never like agonizing choices. So you don't, it's mentally light enough where it's not intimidating to get out if you just want to have something thoughtful, but not like mind blasting.
Yeah, absolutely agree. This is that perfect middle ground for me that I pull this out after everybody's asleep in my house. That's typically when I game, about 9 o'clock or so. I go to bed by 10:30. And so...
What an old man.
I know I'm an old man. I can't help it. And the thing is, I feel really old when I'm like, yeah, I want to play Anachrony right now. But gosh, if I get it out, I won't go to bed till 11:30.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
I better play a game about bird watching.
Yeah, I know. Oh, man. I know how nerdy that sounds, but it occupies that perfect space. I can play it. I can play a satisfying game without just having to, find a solo variant for something super light. This still feels meaty for me, and I can go to bed in the next half hour. It's great. Overall, I think the whole package is incredibly well put together. The game is fun. And in terms of replayability, just to give you a sense of how many cards are in this game, I decided when I first got it, I would keep it set up on the table and play multiple games in a row, which is how I tend to do this anyway. I mean, if I'm going to go through the trouble of setting up a game, I just figure, why not play a few times? So I found that I did not have to shuffle the discard pile to add new cards. I found that it took me 4 games to work my way through solo through the main deck. That's crazy.
Yes.
I mean, that's not not shuffling the discard or anything like that. I got through in 4 games. That's wild.
Yeah, there's a lot of cards. But I will say, with the one caveat, while there is a huge variety of unique cards with unique art, the essential mechanics of each cards, they don't really vary a ton. I mean, I'm sure you could really look through and identify how many different kinds of cards there are. Maybe 10 to 12?
Yeah.
Maybe 15?
Yeah, maybe 15.
Yeah.
But that would be my one major knock against this game is even though there are so many cards and it does take multiple games just to see all of them, the game ends up feeling pretty samey game to game because there are only so many kinds of cards. You're
Right.
going to have your cards that your big predator cards, many of them are going to be the kind that tell you to pull a card and tuck it behind if it's a small bird.
Right.
Which is a cool thematic touch.
Yeah.
But after you've seen it a couple of times, you just have to know you're going to keep seeing it every game. That's going to be one of your 10 major options. You're going to have cards that let you, get extra food from the feeder, or cards that let you pay a card to tuck a card behind a bird. And they're neat ideas. They're thematic ideas, but it does feel samey, which is the sort of thing I never thought I would say about this, given the number of cards in here. But
Right.
I just wish there was more variety in here, more knobs to pull.
Just more mechanical variety. And
Yeah.
there's some that are kind of one-offs that are unique, I feel like. I think there's one card that can switch rows. And maybe there's more that can do that than I realized just because the deck is so big. But there's a lot of cards that are essentially the same. It's just a different kind of bird that lives in a different kind of habitat or something like that. Or it gives you a grub instead of a cherry or something like that.
Yeah, and the same thing is true for the objectives and the end of round goals. I mean, there are a lot of different objective cards, but they're not that different from one another. They're all basically telling you you're looking for birds that have this kind of wingspan. Or you want birds that eat cherries, or you want birds that eat grain. There's a family of cards that say you want a bird that eats this kind of food. And that means then that there are going to be 4 or 5 cards in the deck that are telling you, get a bird that has this kind of food. So yes, there's a lot of replayability and there's a lot of variety, but there are a very few major families of mechanics here.
Yeah.
And the end of round goals are crazy similar to one another.
Yes.
I mean, yes, they change from game to game, but 4 of the goals in there are had the most birds in forests, had the most birds in grasslands, had the most birds in water. Yeah, they're different technically, but what it comes down to at the end of the day is had the most birds in this row. That is a pretty major knock for me against the game. Yeah. I know there are already expansions in the works, and based on what we can tell, all the birds in this base box are found in at least in North America.
Right.
So probably expansions moving forward will be regional, which is cool.
Mm-hmm.
And I presume they will add different mechanics there. And what I would like to see is this game take on the same kind of system that you have in Viticulture, where you now have an alternate deck of visitor cards. I think it would be cool if you don't just shuffle future expansions into this, but you just play with a totally different deck. That would be a really easy way to create a game that offers you different mechanical choices without watering down your deck or providing a bunch of different rules that you have to keep in your head at the same time. Until those expansions come out, though, most of your games are going to feel pretty similar.
And I'll say to the credit, I feel like the design of the game could very easily handle having a little bit more, I guess, more variety in types of cards as far as like mechanics and stuff like that. And it wouldn't really like overly complicated. And I feel like it would still be a really smooth, well-paced experience without drastically increasing the weight or anything like that.
Yeah, I agree with that. She's obviously a very capable designer. I mean, my understanding is this is her first major published game.
Yeah.
Which is mind-boggling.
Yeah, she did a great job.
She did an amazing job. And I mean, she also worked with a great publisher who did her design justice and developed it well, I'm sure.
Yes.
But many designers have made, 10 plus games that haven't achieved this level of streamlined, well thought out, low rules overhead mechanics that just work and work with the theme. And also a plus for me is the theme itself.
Yeah.
I like the bird theme.
Yeah, I like it. It works really well. It's unique. It's different. It's just a very pleasant theme.
Yeah, that's actually the first thing I would list as we talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly for this game. For me, one of the good things is the theme itself and just the way the mechanics and the production bring out that theme. I love fantasy as much as the next guy. I love space. But this is a nice departure for me.
Yeah, it's not like an overly thematic game where it's just completely driven by theme, but the theme is definitely there. It works really well. It reinforces the mechanics. I like it.
Yeah, and the production for this that supplements it is amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the best, probably tied with Root in my mind for the best production I've seen in a game. It's that good.
Yeah, it really is.
And the price point is just absurd to me.
Yes.
An MSRP of $39.99 for this game should not be possible.
Just might be hard to find it for a while.
Yeah, if you're listening to this, I feel kind of bad because I intended for this review to come out when it would be widely available at retail, but apparently they had a hard time estimating the demand for this game, which is good news for them in the long run. But in the short term, it means I saw a copy of Wingspan sell on eBay for $250 yesterday.
Ugh, that is gross.
Do not spend $250 on this game.
No.
It's beautiful. It's not that beautiful.
And the price will come down.
Yeah, you'll be able to get this cheap again one day. So hold on, because the amount of stuff you get in the box is amazing for the price. It's a great production, great theme, and I think the mechanics, the simple rules, the good depth that you get here, that's another major good side of this for me.
Yeah.
And I like the solo model. Automa Factory does a good job. We've had issues with their random card flips in the past. For me, this is definitely a progression of that model.
Yes.
It feels better here than it has, I think, in any other game that I've played from them. Which is, I mean, I guess not saying that much because I've only played like 3 other games from them. But still, I think that this is definitely the best of the bunch.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Mm-hmm.
So it's really simple to manage. It gives you a nice challenge and I think retains almost every element from the multiplayer experience. So this is a game that I really enjoyed playing multiplayer and would definitely play again that way, but I thoroughly enjoyed my solo plays of it.
Yeah, I would say that it definitely is, I would say just as satisfying pretty much.
There's always increased tension when you're playing with human players as far as drafting cards goes or, competing for end of round goals. Anytime you're playing with more than one opponent even, that's true, because it's going to be longer until it's your turn again. But I think almost all of that is retained in this experience.
Yeah, I would agree. I would say that too. Like, it's never really just the exact same, but it really brings a lot of that to the solo game.
So I see this being one that I pull out many times in the future just because it's so quick to set up, so quick to play, provides a good solo challenge, and it looks great on the table. So there's so much good here to say about this game. And in fact, as far as things that are bad for the game, I don't have that much to say.
Yeah, it's hard to say this is bad. The lack of variety in just such a huge, beautiful deck that there's just not more variety in it makes me a little sad. But it's hard to really put it firmly in bad. I don't know. What do you think?
I think for now, it's bad for
Okay.
me. I feel that same tension you do in that I'm happy with what I've got. I have no
Right.
qualms with any of the mechanics here. I just want to see a few more. Even a few more would have really helped me feel like this game feels different from game to game.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it does feel different, but because you see the same set of 10 mechanics in every game, even if you had like 15 major ones here, I think it would feel like there were paths that you could double down on and focus on that maybe differentiated each game more.
Right.
So, yeah, it feels like the definition of a first world problem, right? To say,
Right.
here's this gorgeous game that does so many things right. I wish that it had a little bit more.
Yeah, but the state of board games, things are very competitive now.
They are very competitive, and even my board game shelf is competing for my attention. The games that are competing for my attention on that shelf all have things that are really special in them, because I keep a very lean, small collection, relatively speaking.
Right.
I've been in the hobby since 2010, and I only have 48 games, I think. And a lot of those I keep around because they're family games, things that I wouldn't consider part of the core, what I would choose to pull out on any given night.
Right. And you run things for like church group type stuff, right?
Yeah. So there are different venues that I save games for. Like I know I'm going to play The Resistance once a year with my parents. And that's enough for me to hang on to it.
How does that go down? Well?
It goes down well. It's the only game that my wife loves.
That's so funny.
I know. So I keep a small collection of games. All of them count.
Mm-hmm.
The ones I keep are games that I really love. This is staying in my collection for sure. But when I look at it on my shelf, I do have to think, is it going to feel different enough from the last time I played it that I would pull it out again?
Right. So maybe just something that needs a little bit longer, more time on the shelf before you want to pull it down.
Yeah, that's it. It's going to stay on there. I've already played it several times since I got it in January. I really love this game. I do think what's going to put it way over the top for me is when the expansions start coming out and I just have decks that I can swap out.
Mm-hmm.
That's when I'm going to be just over the moon giddy about it. But for now, I really love the game. I enjoy my plays of it. I just wish they were differentiated a little bit more.
Right.
And I've got nothing ugly to say about this game.
Yeah, I don't either.
I mean, the word ugly shouldn't be within 10 miles of this game. It's so beautifully done.
Really? I mean, it adds to the enjoyment a whole lot. It's just such a pretty game.
Pretty in terms of how it looks, but also just in how elegant and streamlined it feels. It's an excellent production all around. So this is the part where we talk about whether this game gets the stamp of approval from us. And a stamp of approval game is a game that is like a Hall of Fame solo game for us, not just in terms of what we think it brings to the solo gaming community, but whether it's a game that just Carter and I love. But for us, that's a pretty exclusive award. We've only given it out a handful of times over the course of this podcast. And for me, this is a game that would get the stomp. I love this game. I think it's an excellent production and one that I definitely want to revisit over and over. And I can see when expansions come out, and that's inevitable given the success of this game, that will just further boost my love for it. But even as it stands right now, I think it's a stomp-worthy game.
Yeah, for me, though, it's not quite there. I think it's a really great game. I like playing it a whole lot. I would recommend it to lots of people. But it's not a game that I just am absolutely in love with. So yeah, I'm going to have to withhold it. So this week we won't be handing out the stamp of approval for it.
No. But this is the sort of game that I think might be on the cusp more than almost any other game we've talked about so far.
Yeah.
So I don't know how we go back to revisit games in the future that maybe if we shift on this as expansions come out and that sort of thing, and there's more diversity in terms of mechanics, maybe that would change. But for now, at least, if I am willing to give the stomp to something and Carter isn't, then it doesn't get the stomp. But this is still a really good game.
Yes.
And one that I really enjoy, and one that you would play again, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, solo or multiplayer?
Yes.
Okay, see, that's good enough for me.
I think more so multiplayer than solo.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think that's part of it for me.
And I would even go so far as to say that I would recommend this to far more people than I would recommend Terraforming Mars, for instance, a game that did get the stamp of approval, just because I think its theme is going to be more palatable for people.
More palatable, is lighter. It'll be easier for people who are into board gaming but maybe don't like super heavy games to get behind and get into.
So if you're looking for a game that is interesting but sets up fast and plays fast and is just a lot of fun when you get to the table, check out Wingspan from Stonemaier Games and designer Elizabeth Hargrave. But that's all we've got for you this episode. If you like this show and you want to find other shows like it about board games, check out the Dice Tower Network. We're a member of that network. It's a collection of podcasts about board games. You can find out more about the other shows there at thedicetower.com. You can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram if you want to find more about what we're playing or what games we're getting in. You can follow us on there. We also have lots of giveaways on there, so follow us if you want to learn more about that. If you haven't yet, please go onto iTunes and rate or review the show. That makes it easier for other people to find us and hear what we're doing, and we can expand what we're able to do with Solosaurus. So go onto iTunes, give us a review. And if you haven't yet gone onto Board Game Geek and gotten your Solosaurus micro badge, we have them. I keep thinking that I'm going to take this out of the end notes for the show, but then every time I mention it, we have another 3 or 4 people who say they want to get the badge. It costs 8 Geek Gold to get a badge on Board Game Geek, but if you don't have that, I'm more than happy to spot you the money. Just send me a message and I will be happy to send that stuff your way. That's all we've got for you this week. Until next time, I'm Brandon Waite.
And I'm Carter Mackey.
And this is Solosaurus.